Buying your first dirt bike is super exciting, but when you're in the researching phase, all the different options out there can be extremely overwhelming. In this video, I'm going to demystify the different types of dirt bikes out there and explain what each type of bike is designed for in a simple and easy to understand way so you can find the perfect first bike for you. But before we get into all that, I'm trying to reach 5,000 subs. It's free and it really helps me out, so hit that button below and join the Supermoto crew today. In this video, the types of bikes we're going to cover are motocross bikes, woods bikes, beginner bikes, electric bikes, dual sports, adventure bikes, and pit bikes. I'm also going to explain briefly about the difference between two-stroke bikes and four-stroke bikes. Now, I'm not a mechanic. I'm not going to go into super technical detail. If you want that, there's plenty of other resources on the internet. I'm just going to kind of give you a broad understanding and a broad sort of sense of what you're getting into with each type of bike. The difference between a two-stroke motorcycle and a four-stroke motorcycle, those words simply mean the type of engine that it is. A two-stroke motorcycle, number one, it requires you to mix your oil and gasoline before you put it in the bike. On a four-stroke bike, you can just fill it up right at a gas station or get, straight gas from the gas station and put it right in. So with the two strokes, there's that extra step of mixing gas. Four strokes are gonna have a lot more linear power delivery. Whenever you hit the throttle, it's basically gonna be a consistent amount of power the whole time that you're twisting the throttle. You're not gonna have any sort of spike, bog, or anything like that. If you're in the right gear and you hit the throttle, you're gonna get basically a constant delivery of power. On a two-stroke motorcycle, you may have heard the term power band. Now basically what that is it's a point in the RPM range when you twist the throttle that before you reach it, the engine's gonna sort of feel like it's bogging, like it's not giving a ton of power. But then once you reach that point in the RPMs, it's gonna be like a burst of power all of a sudden. So it's not a linear power delivery. It kind of has that like punch all of a sudden. That's sort of the main differences between two strokes and four strokes. That's all I'm going to get into it. I'm not going to go any deeper than that. Like I said, if you want to learn more about that, there's plenty of other resources on the internet out there to explain that in much greater depth. Now that we got that out of the way, I would like to start with beginner bikes because, to be honest with you, if you're watching this video, beginner bikes are probably going to be the best choice for you. However, I would recommend watching the whole way to the end of the video just so you understand the differences between all the bikes. That way you can kind of tell the difference when you're shopping around or when you're talking to people about bikes. You'll be a lot more knowledgeable about what you want and what you don't want. But I'm going to start with the beginner bikes and explain to you a little bit about them. So beginner bikes are slow, low, easy to ride and maintain. What I mean by that is they're not super fast bikes. They're going to have a nice tractor-like consistent power delivery, and they're not very fast. They don't have a ton of quick acceleration. They have a low seat height usually. So they're easy for newer riders, so they don't have to worry about that balance at first when they're learning how to use the clutch and just ride the bike in general. Like I said, this makes them very easy to ride. And they don't require a lot of maintenance either. They're very bulletproof engines for the most part, and you don't have to do a ton of working on them like you would with some of the other categories that we're going to talk about later in the video. They're great for learning the fundamentals on, like I said, and they're usually four-stroke motorcycles. Some examples you'll find is a bike that I made a lot of videos about on this channel, so make sure you go and check my channel out to learn more about this specific bike. The CRF 250F, that's Honda's beginner trail bike. Also, Yamaha makes the TTR 125, TTR 230, etc. There's plenty more beginner bikes where that came from. But that is the beginner bike. You also might hear me calling it a trail bike. Either one, that's what those bikes are and what they're designed for. Now, moving along to the next category, we're going to talk about motocross bikes. So motocross bikes or MX bikes, they are designed specifically for motocross tracks. If you've seen motocross racing or supercross racing on TV, those tracks with the jumps, I'm sure you know what a motocross track is. That's what motocross bikes or MX bikes are designed for. They have a super snappy power delivery, so you're gonna get a whole burst of power all at once. It's a very punchy, all there, all right now power delivery. The suspension is motocross specific suspension, so it's made primarily to tackle obstacles like jumps, hard turns, ruts, braking bumps, that sort of thing, stuff that you would find on a motocross track. They're easy to ride on motocross tracks, and they're typically hard to ride in the woods. Now, you can ride pretty much any bike on pretty much any terrain. It's not impossible, but the motocross bike is not the tool for the job when you're looking to ride a lot of trails in the woods, and vice versa. Now, the maintenance on motocross bikes, being that they're a competition bike, they're more of a race bike, they're going to be a high performance engine, the maintenance is going to be at much more frequent intervals as compared to the beginner bikes. Some examples of motocross bikes are the CRF 250R, Honda CRF 450R, the Yamaha YZ 250F and 450F. Those are 4-stroke race motocross bikes. They also make 2-stroke race motocross bikes. Yamaha makes the YZ125, which I've made videos on my channel. You can check those out. And they also make a YZ250. Those are both 2-stroke motocross bikes. The difference between engine size vary. You might notice in the beginner bikes category, the CRF 250F was a beginner bike and the CRF 250R was a motocross bike. They have the same engine size, the same cylinder size, but the power, based on a lot of other factors that come together, make the motocross version a much more race spec, high performance engine. And it's going to be a lot more power. It's going to be pushing out a lot more horsepower than the beginner bike CRF 250F, which is kind of confusing, I know, and that's why I'm making this video, to try to kind of give you guys an idea of the different types of bikes, because a lot of times people just look at the engine size, that number there, 250, 450, 300, what have you, and they think, oh, okay, it's a 250, it's going to have this much power. It's a 450, it's going to have this much power. When really, power varies wildly between the different categories of bikes. So I just wanted to put that little note in there. Now let's move on to woods bikes. So like I said before, woods bikes in this video particularly, there's a ton of different types of woods bikes, but I'm going to group them all together, that being harescramble bikes, GNCC bikes, and enduro bikes. Now me personally, I grew up riding mostly motocross, so I don't have a ton of experience with woods bikes, but I do have a general understanding of the differences. So I'll give you those right now. Woods bikes are going to have more of a low-end power delivery. They're a lot smoother for rough or slippery terrain, maybe over roots or rocks in the woods, that sort of thing. And they're not going to be as punchy as like a motocross bike would deliver power. They're going to have woods-specific suspension or enduro-specific suspension, what have you, depending on the bike you get, which is going to be much better performing over the types of terrain that you would typically find on woods loops, trails, hare scrambles, or enduro courses, that sort of thing. And it's not going to be as ideal for motocross tracks, obstacles like big jumps, things of that nature. They're very easy to ride on trails because that's what they're designed for. They're literally a woods bike, so they're designed for trails in the woods. They're not the most ideal for motocross tracks. However, like I said with the motocross bikes, it's not impossible to ride it on a track. You can do both, but it's not the ideal tool for the job. Maintenance on these bikes is going to be very similar to motocross bikes because they are high performance race engines. So you're going to be doing a lot more frequent intervals of maintenance as compared to the beginner bikes. Some examples of these are going to be the YZ250X. KTM makes a whole host of enduro woods bikes as well. They have the 300XC, the 250XC. I believe the XC is the hare scramble model, and the XCW is the enduro model, so you might see 300XCW or 300XC. I don't have a whole lot of experience with these, but you can go look up the specifics of those bikes on the individual manufacturer's website, as well as a ton of other brands make woods bikes as well as motocross bikes too. So moving on to the next category, we're going to talk a little bit about dual sports. A dual sport motorcycle is basically a dirt bike. It's like pretty much usually the same frame as a dirt bike, the same exact style of bike as a dirt bike, but it's designed for on-road and off-road use. It's going to be kind of like a mix of both. It's not particularly great at either. It's not going to be amazing on the road, and it's not going to be amazing off-road on tracks or trails. It's better on like back roads and dirt roads. Dual sports perform a lot better on slower speeds, rougher terrain, what you'd find on back roads, dirt roads. And it's going to be really heavy in the woods or on a motocross track. So it's going to be not as maneuverable as a specific motocross bike or a woods bike. Now, the maintenance is going to be a lot less than the motocross and woods bikes as well, typically. And they're fairly easy to ride for beginners also. Now, something to consider is they're typically street legal, so you would need to have either a motorcycle permit or motorcycle license of some sort, depending on where you live, in order to be able to ride this and purchase it. And another thing to consider with that is you would also have to be paying insurance usually, and any of the fees associated with having a street legal motorcycle. Oh, I'll give you some examples of dual sports as well. You got the DRZ 400S, you got the CRF 300L, you got the KLX 300, and a whole host of other bikes as well. Now, additionally, if you've been researching dirt bikes and you've come across dual sports, you've probably also seen adventure bikes. Adventure bikes are basically the much bigger cousin of the dual sport. They're going to be a lot bigger, and they're primarily not as catered to off-road. They're much faster on the highways, fire roads. They're not ideal for tight woods or motocross tracks. They're more catered towards longer road trips with some off-road sections. But you're not going to be doing hard enduro or hitting massive triples on a motocross track on an adventure bike. And it's pretty much the same as a dual sport, other than the fact that it's on a much larger chassis. You're going to have a lot bigger and bulkier hardware and things on the bike. It's going to feel a lot different than when you sit on a dual sport. A dual sport is going to feel a lot like a typical motocross bike or general dirt bike, whereas an adventure bike is going to feel a lot more bulky like a street bike. Some examples of adventure bikes are the Tenere 700, Africa Twin, Royal Enfield Himalayan, and many more as well. Moving on to the next category, and this is a really exciting one. It's a very new category of dirt bike, the electric dirt bike. The electric dirt bikes are brand new technology. They have crazy power. They have super quick acceleration. There's tons of different versions to choose from, and they're generally going to be less maintenance than a combustion engine because there's not as many parts and pieces, and it's all electronic. It's just kind of self-contained. Now, some examples of these, I don't have a whole lot of experience with these. I've only ever ridden the Sur-Ron Light B. Different companies make tons of different bikes. Particularly for like beginners, I would recommend the Sur-Ron Light B. The Sur-Ron Ultra B is a little bit bigger, and I want to do a video on that in the future as well. But Sur-Ron makes a couple different ones, and also there's a company, Stark. They make the Stark Varg. You may have heard of it. It's primarily for motocross. It's a very powerful bike. It's a full-size bike, whereas the Sur-Ron Light B and the Ultra B are much smaller. The Light B kind of is like a mountain bike. The Ultra B is like a little bit bigger than a mountain bike. The Stark Varg is a full-size motocross bike. It looks exactly like what you'd see a 450 to look like. And like I said, primarily for motocross, but also I've seen this awesome YouTuber Matt Spears. Check out his channel. He's done some crazy enduro on the Stark Varg as well. So electric bikes are not something to sleep on. They're a very, very interesting and new technology. So I urge you to look more into electric bikes as well. And that leads me to my next category, which is pit bikes. Now, you may be scratching your head and wondering why I put pit bikes on this video, but when I was thinking of different bikes that a first-time dirt bike enthusiast might want to purchase, pit bikes did come to mind. There's quite a few benefits to pit bikes. Now, what pit bikes are basically, it's, for example, like a CRF 110 or any 110 really, which is primarily designed for kids. It's like a stepping stone when a kid gets on a really small bike like a 50, then they move up the ranks and they get up to like a 110. Their small size kind of leads it to like a BMX bike feel. And because of that, there's a whole community of people who love pit bikes. There's lots of modifications you can do to them, like big bore kits to make the engine more powerful, stiffer suspension, bigger handlebars, all that stuff. And they're ideal for small tracks and trails. Think like BMX trails and BMX jumps and that sort of thing. And they're very small for storage as well. Like if you don't have a lot of garage space, you can just throw a pit bike in there and it won't take up a lot of storage, but you can still kind of get that dirt bike fun. It's just a much smaller form factor. There's a whole small community of pit bike racers, so they have specific pit bike events all over the place popping up here and there that you can do, and they're just a really neat little bike, and honestly kind of a slept on option as well as a first bike. If you're someone who does have a garage and you're interested in like tinkering and learning how bikes work, you want to learn like the mechanics of the dirt bikes and that sort of thing, a pit bike is a pretty good place to start as well. That's all the different types of bikes I wanted to list out in this video. I hope this video helped you understand the differences between the many types of dirt bikes so you can make an informed first bike purchase. If you have any thoughts or additional questions or points you feel I left out, please feel free to write them in the comments below. That's all from me. Soup out.